Quebec, something extraordinary is happening beneath the ice and snow. Scientists are staring at their computer screens in disbelief, watching data stream in from satellites orbiting 500 kilometers above Earth's surface. The readings are showing something they've never seen before at this scale. What they're looking at isn't just another mineral deposit. It's potentially one of the largest lithium discoveries in human history, sitting quietly in Canada's James Bay region. And it might just rewrite the rules of the global energy economy. Stay with me here because what I'm about to walk you through changes everything you think you know about energy, transportation, and the power dynamics that have shaped our world for the past century. The discovery is called Cisco. And before you dismiss this as just another mining story, understand what's actually at stake. This single project, still in its exploration phase, is showing potential reserves of up to 300 million tons of lithium-bearing rock, grading approximately 1% lithium oxide. Let me put that in perspective. If those numbers hold up, if the drilling confirms what the early data suggests, we're talking about enough lithium to power hundreds of millions of electric vehicles, enough to build battery storage systems that could stabilize entire national power grids, enough to fundamentally alter who controls the resources that will define the 21st century. And here's the thing that should make every oil executive on the planet lose sleep. This isn't happening in some geopolitically unstable region. This isn't in a country where foreign companies face nationalization risks or where supply chains can be weaponized for political leverage. This is Canada, stable democratic rule of law Canada with existing infrastructure, hydroelectric power that can run processing plants with minimal emissions and direct road access to North American markets. But to understand why this matters so profoundly, we need to step back and look at what's actually happening to oil demand right now today in real time across the global economy. The International Energy Agency released data in 2025 that should have sent shockwaves through the petroleum industry. Electric vehicles are now displacing approximately 6 million barrels of oil per day worldwide. 6 million barrels every single day. That's equivalent to removing the entire oil production of a major OPEC member from global demand. And by 2030, just 5 years from now, that number is projected to hit 11 million barrels per day. By 2035, we're looking at displacement of 12 million barrels daily. Let that sink in for a moment. Global demand for oil-based road transport fuels is expected to peak around 2025, not in some distant future. This year, right now, the inflection point where oil demand for transportation begins its structural irreversible decline is happening as you're watching this video. China alone is on track to displace half of that global oil demand reduction through its expanding electric vehicle fleet. Over 20 million EVs are expected to be sold globally in 2025, representing roughly 25% of all new car sales. In Norway, 88% of new cars sold are now fully electric. In Denmark, that number hit 56% in 2024. The United Kingdom saw EVs take nearly 30% of new car sales. These aren't marginal shifts, these are tectonic movements in how humanity powers transportation, and every single one of those electric vehicles needs something oil cannot provide: lithium. Here's where the story gets really interesting, because for decades the narrative around oil was simple. Whoever controlled the oil controlled global energy security. Nations rose and fell based on their access to petroleum. Wars were fought over it. Alliances were forged because of it. The entire geopolitical architecture of the 20th century was built on the foundation of oil dependency. But lithium is different, and the stakes might be even higher. Right now, today, lithium production and processing are catastrophically concentrated. 3 countries control about 85% of global lithium supply: Australia, Chile, and China. But here's the critical detail that changes everything. While Australia produces the most raw lithium ore, China controls approximately 60% of global lithium refining capacity. They process the raw material into the battery-grade chemicals that actually power electric vehicles, and energy storage systems. Think about what that means strategically. China doesn't just mine lithium. They control the critical middle step, the refining, that transforms useless rock into the materials that power the clean energy transition. And they're using that position aggressively. In 2025, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce updated its catalogue of technologies prohibited from export to include lithium carbonate and hydroxide preparation, along with cathode material manufacturing. They're not just dominating the supply chain, they're actively working to keep competitors from building their own refining capacity. The geopolitical risk here is profound. The International Energy Agency ranks lithium's geopolitical vulnerability at 3 out of 58 on their risk scale, precisely because of this concentration. When contemporary Amperex technology, known as CL's suspended operations at a major lithium mine in China's Jiangxi province in 2025, global spot prices immediately spiked. That single mine represented roughly 3% of global supply, and its temporary closure sent shockwaves through markets worldwide. This is the context into which Canada's Cisco discovery arrives like a geopolitical earthquake. The Cisco project sits in Quebec's James Bay region, traditional territory of the creation of EU ISG. And the way it was discovered tells you everything about how technology is changing resource exploration. A company called Fleet Space Technologies, based in Australia, deployed something called the Exosphere platform. Here's how it works. They place battery-powered sensors called geodesics near the Earth's surface. These devices continuously listen for seismic energy from wind, waves, and human activity. But instead of transmitting that data through ground-based networks, they send it directly to a swarm of small satellites in orbit. Those satellites relay the information to processing centers, where artificial intelligence algorithms analyze the seismic signatures and build three-dimensional models of what's beneath the surface. This technology is revolutionary because it lets exploration teams map potential deposits before drilling a single hole. Traditional exploration is expensive, slow, and requires educated guessing about where to drill. With Exosphere, companies can target high-probability zones with precision that was impossible even 5 years ago. At Cisco, the AI-powered mapping pointed to massive spoiime mineralization. Spomine is a lithium-aluminum silicate mineral, the primary hard rock source of lithium used in batteries. And when Q2 Metals, the company controlling the property, began drilling in 2025, the results exceeded expectations. Multiple drill holes confirmed high-grade intercepts over extensive widths. One hole designated CS25044 intercepted 457 meters of continuous spoimine pegmatite grading 1.65% lithium oxide. Another returned 179 meters of mineralization. These aren't narrow veins. These are thick, consistent bodies of ore that remain open at depth and along strike, meaning the deposit likely extends far beyond what's been drilled so far. Q2 Metals mobilized a fourth drilling rig in late 2025 to accelerate exploration ahead of a planned resource estimate scheduled for the first half of 2026. The Association des Luxe Barras Mines de Québec listed Cisco as a finalist for its Discovery of the Year award. Industry observers are watching this project with the kind of intensity usually reserved for major gold or copper discoveries, because they understand what's actually being discovered here isn't just lithium. It's energy independence, it's supply chain security, it's geopolitical leverage in the most important industrial transition of our lifetimes. And Cisco isn't alone. Canada's James Bay region is emerging as a global lithium district. Patriot Battery Metals has identified more than 70 lithium pegmatite outcrops at its Corvette property. Brunswick Exploration discovered undocumented spodumene bearing pegmatites at its Eland project. North Arrow Minerals found several new mineralized pegmatites in the Northwest Territories. Comet Lithium made a fresh spodumene discovery at its Elmer East property in late 2025, with visible spodumene crystals in outcrops averaging 3 to 7 ft in width. What we're watching unfold across northern Canada is the birth of a new lithium province, comparable in significance to Australia's major deposits or Chile's Atacama Desert brine operations, but with one critical advantage: geography. Canada sits directly adjacent to the United States, the world's second-largest automotive market, and a country desperate to reduce its dependence on Chinese battery supply chains. Truck routes from James Bay to manufacturing centres in Ontario, Michigan, and beyond are measured in hundreds of kilometres, not thousands. Processing facilities can be powered by Quebec's abundant hydroel electricity, which generates 61.7% of Canada's total electricity and ranks the country as the third largest hydroelectric producer globally. This means lower emission refining compared to coal-powered grids elsewhere. The Canadian federal government understands the strategic value of what's being discovered. In 2022, they released a $3.88 billion 8-year Canadian critical minerals strategy specifically targeting increased domestic extraction and production of lithium and other battery metals. That strategy identified 6 minerals as priorities for their distinct potential to spur economic growth: lithium, graphite, nickel, cobalt, copper, and rare earth elements. And the money is flowing. Natural Resources Canada committed $914 million in August 2024 to 6 clean hydrogen research and development projects, including demonstrations of renewable-based production and new storage technologies. The federal government has been accepting applications under the Critical Minerals Infrastructure Fund, supporting development of infrastructure projects that enable sustainable critical mineral development. Bloomberg NEF recognized Canada as having the strongest battery supply chain potential in the world, ranking it number 1 in its global lithium-ion battery supply chain ranking in 2024. Though China reclaimed the top spot in 2025 due to lower electricity prices and advancing infrastructure, Canada remains a raw materials powerhouse with a stable investment environment that China, for all its industrial might, cannot replicate. But here's what makes this moment genuinely historic. We're not just talking about Canada finding lithium to supply batteries. We're talking about the fundamental displacement of oil as the strategic resource that defines global power. Let me walk you through the mathematics of what's actually happening. Each electric vehicle battery contains approximately 10 kilon of lithium. That might not sound like much, but battery sizes are growing rapidly. Compact EVs now carry batteries around 30 kWh. Heavy-duty electric trucks are being equipped with batteries exceeding 200 kWh. Larger batteries mean more lithium per vehicle, and lithium used per vehicle battery increased 1.5 times by 2023 compared to earlier generations. Global EV sales continue setting records. Over 20 million units are expected to be sold in 2025. The International Energy Agency projects that demand from EVs and grid battery storage will account for 91% of lithium use by 2035. Lithium demand is expected to rise more than 5-fold by 2040 under current policy scenarios. Some analysts project global demand reaching 1.88 million tons of lithium carbonate equivalent annually in the near term, potentially doubling to over 1.3 million tons by 2030. And it's not just vehicles. Data centers are rapidly adopting lithium-ion batteries for backup power and load balancing. Google alone is using over 100 million lithium-ion cells in its data centers globally. These facilities take up half the space of traditional backup systems while holding twice the power and lasting twice as long. As electricity demand from global data centers is projected to rise 2.5 times by 2030, battery energy storage systems are becoming essential infrastructure. Grid-scale battery storage is emerging as the second pillar of lithium demand growth. Bloomberg NEF projects energy storage installations will expand at a compound annual growth rate of 21% through 2030. These massive battery systems stabilize power grids that increasingly rely on intermittent renewable sources like wind and solar. They store excess electricity when production exceeds demand and discharge it during peak consumption periods. In Canada alone, battery energy storage capacity reached 20.44 gigawatt-hours in 2023, with 2.1 gigawatt-hours added that year. Projections suggest capacity will rise to approximately 58 gigawatt-hours by 2035. Many new projects pair battery systems with renewable sources. Canada currently has about 65 megawatt of solar plus storage in operation, with another 130 megawatt under construction. Planned battery additions set to come online before 2030 could lead to a tenfold increase in storage capacity compared with 2024 levels. Now, contrast this explosive growth in lithium demand with what's happening to oil. The IEA's analysis shows that growing EV stocks reduce the need for oil dramatically. The projected EV fleet displaces 6 million barrels per day of diesel and gasoline in 2030, a six-fold increase on displacement in 2023. By 2035, oil displacement reaches 11 million barrels per day in their stated policy scenario and 12 million barrels per day in their more ambitious policy scenario. To put those numbers in perspective, 12 million barrels per day is roughly equivalent to the entire oil production of Saudi Arabia. We're talking about removing a Saudi Arabia-sized chunk of demand from global oil markets over the next decade. Not because supplies are running out, because consumers are choosing a different technology. And here's the kicker. Even if global oil prices fall to $40 per barrel, electric vehicles remain cost-effective, especially with home charging. IEA analysts highlighted that drivers continue saving money by switching to electric vehicles, even at dramatically lower oil prices. In China, fast public charging costs about twice as much as charging at home. Yet, EVs still offer better fuel savings than gasoline-powered cars. The economics have flipped. For the first time in the history of personal transportation, the alternative to petroleum is not just cleaner, it's cheaper. It performs better. It requires less maintenance, and it's powered by resources that dozens of countries can produce, rather than the handful of nations blessed with oil reserves. This is the industrial and geopolitical context into which Canada's lithium discoveries are arriving. But there's another layer to this story that most coverage is missing: the environmental and social dynamics of lithium extraction. Lithium mining has environmental impacts. That's undeniable. Hard rock mining requires crushing massive quantities of ore, chemical processing to extract lithium compounds, and careful management of waste products. Brine extraction used in places like Chile's Atacama Desert can deplete water resources in already arid regions. But here's the critical comparison. A 2023 analysis found that switching to electric vehicles powered by lithium batteries can cut the greenhouse gas emissions break-even 0.5-0.7 times faster compared to continuing with internal combustion engines. Even accounting for the emissions from mining, processing, battery manufacturing, and electricity generation, EVs become carbon positive much faster than petroleum vehicles over their lifetimes. And the industry is evolving rapidly. Direct lithium extraction, or DLE, promises increased efficiency and reduced environmental impact compared to traditional evaporation ponds. In Alberta, companies are experimenting with extracting lithium from oil field brines, effectively recovering valuable battery materials from waste streams of existing petroleum operations. E3 Lithium successfully produced battery-quality lithium carbonate from Luke brines using demonstration-scale equipment in January 2025. Recycling is becoming a significant piece of the puzzle. By 2025, decommissioned battery capacity in China reached levels that could supply substantial amounts of recovered lithium back into the supply chain. As the first generation of EV batteries reaches end of life, after 5 to 8 years of use, recycling infrastructure is scaling up globally. Advanced processes combining pyrometallurgy and hydrometallurgy are increasing recovery efficiency of reactive metals, including lithium and graphite. The regulatory framework is maturing as well. Europe has strong regulations for battery recycling with comprehensive standards covering transport of end-of-life batteries, tracking systems, and safety and environmental requirements. These frameworks are being adopted and adapted by other jurisdictions as the global battery industry expands. In Canada specifically, the Cisco project must follow strict environmental assessment protocols under provincial law and requires consultation with Indigenous communities. Exploration has so far relied on non-invasive geophysical methods, but any future mine development would require extensive environmental and community impact reviews. These regulatory steps are built into Quebec's permitting framework and are non-negotiable for project advancement. Q2 Metals has not released a production timeline. Current estimates remain conceptual and don't yet qualify as reserves or measured resources under Canada's NI 43-101 reporting standard, which requires detailed technical and economic analysis before reserves can be declared. The company is focused on completing its inaugural mineral resource estimate, scheduled for the first quarter of 2026. But assuming the geology continues to support the early indications, assuming permitting processes move forward responsibly, assuming markets continue demanding battery materials at projected rates, what we're looking at is Canada positioning itself as a cornerstone supplier of the single most important industrial commodity of the energy transition. And that brings us to perhaps the most important question of all. Can lithium actually make oil worthless? The answer is nuanced. Oil isn't going away entirely, at least not in our lifetimes. Petrochemicals are used in plastics, pharmaceuticals, synthetic materials, and industrial processes that won't transition to alternatives quickly. Aviation and long-haul shipping will likely continue relying on liquid fuels for decades because battery technology isn't yet viable for those applications at scale. But here's what is changing irreversibly. Oil's role as the dominant fuel for personal transportation, the largest single source of petroleum demand, is entering terminal decline. Road transport accounts for the majority of global oil consumption, and that market is being systematically electrified. Norway's experience offers a preview, with 88% of new cars sold being fully electric and another 3% plug-in hybrids. Norway's oil demand from roads fell 12% from 2021 to 2024. As EV penetration increases across Europe, North America, and Asia, similar demand destruction will ripple through global petroleum markets. The strategic value of oil, the geopolitical leverage it provided to producer nations, the conflicts it sparked and alliances it forged, all of that was predicated on one fundamental reality. There was no alternative. Economies needed oil to function. Transportation depended on it absolutely. That dependency created power. Lithium breaks that dependency, not completely, not immediately, but structurally and irreversibly over the coming decades. And unlike oil, which is concentrated in specific geological formations, primarily in the Middle East, Russia, and North America, lithium is geographically distributed. Australia has massive hard rock deposits. Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia control enormous brine reserves in the lithium triangle. China has domestic resources it's developing aggressively. And now Canada is emerging as a major hard rock lithium province with multiple world-class deposits in various stages of exploration and development. This geographic distribution means no single nation or cartel can dominate global lithium supply the way OPEC influenced oil markets for decades. Even China's current dominance in refining can be challenged as Western nations build processing capacity. Something actively happening across North America and Europe. The United States has 34 battery gigafactories, either planned, under construction, or operational as of 2025, a massive increase from just 2 facilities in 2019. Europe's critical raw materials, Act aims for 40% of critical minerals used in the EU to come from local or allied sources by 2030. These are deliberate strategic efforts to diversify supply chains away from single points of failure. Canada's lithium discoveries fit perfectly into this reconfiguration of global supply chains. They offer Western manufacturers access to high-quality lithium resources in a politically stable jurisdiction with strong rule of law, environmental standards, and existing trade relationships. The Canadian Critical Mineral Strategy annual report from 2024 noted that since 2020, automotive and battery manufacturers have announced investments exceeding $40 billion in electric vehicle production and battery supply chains. These aren't speculative bets. These are major industrial commitments by companies including General Motors, Ford, Stellantis, and others that see the writing on the wall. The transition is happening. The only question is who positions themselves to benefit from it, and who gets left behind clinging to the old paradigm. So where does this leave us? Canada has discovered or is in the process of confirming lithium deposits that could rank among the largest in the world. The Cisco project alone shows potential for hundreds of millions of tons of lithium-bearing material with grades that make economic sense to mine and process. Dozens of other projects across Quebec, Ontario, the Northwest Territories, and other provinces are advancing through exploration and development. Global lithium demand is projected to grow more than five-fold by 2040, driven primarily by electric vehicles and energy storage systems. That demand growth is coinciding with aggressive efforts by Western nations to reduce dependence on Chinese supply chains and secure domestic sources of battery materials. Oil demand for transportation is peaking right now and will enter structural decline as electrification accelerates. Millions of barrels per day of petroleum demand are being displaced annually, and that displacement will only accelerate as EV adoption spreads and battery costs continue falling. The geopolitical architecture of the 21st century will be built on access to lithium, rare earths, graphite, nickel, cobalt, and other battery metals, not oil and natural gas. Nations that secure reliable supplies of these materials and build domestic processing capacity will hold strategic advantages. Those that don't will find themselves dependent on others for the technologies that power modern economies. Canada is positioning itself on the winning side of that transition, not through luck, but through deliberate policy, strategic investment, and the simple geological fortune of sitting atop some of the richest critical mineral deposits on the planet. Will lithium make oil worthless? In the literal sense, no. Petroleum will retain value for specific applications for decades to come. But in the strategic sense, in the geopolitical sense, in the economic sense that has defined global power dynamics for the past century, yes, oil's dominance is ending. Lithium's era is beginning. And Canada just found one of the biggest deposits of the resource that will define the future. If this breakdown helped you understand not just what's happening, but why it matters and what comes next, consider subscribing. We're covering the stories that are actually reshaping how energy, economics, and geopolitics work in the 21st century, not just the headlines that grab clicks. Thanks for watching.